My goal is to make the United States part of the blue zone. I think that would be absolutely wonderful. And we see that there are already countries implementing this for thousands of years, and we have a lot to learn from that. So the blue zone it's not a political movement or anything like that, but it's different regions in different parts of the world that have the highest concentration of people who live to be over 100 years old. And what's really fascinating about this is that these people are not an decrepit 100-year-old person. These are people that are involved in their communities. They are walking to their grocery stores. They're going to church. They're able to move and play with their great grandkids. They're very sharp. They're not dealing with the issues that we deal with here once we reach 60 or 70 or 80 years old. And so that's something that I think would be absolutely phenomenal. And so we see certain parts of South America, of course, one of my favorite regions, the Mediterranean, such as South Italy, by Sicily and that area, as well as, the Greek region. These are different areas, and even around Japan, we find that they have that qualification where they're labeled as the blue zones. And so what are they doing differently that we're not doing here? And how can we make it a common practice for people to be doing these things so that we can have a higher concentration of quality of life and quantity of life, where people are living to be 100 years old and also getting to enjoy it? And so there's a few things that they tend to have in common. One is, believe it or not, it's not nutritional, it's not exercise, it's not anything like that. It's actually an emotional thing. And what it is a sense of purpose and community. We see that in those regions, those centennials, people who live to 100 years or older, have a very strong connection with their family, and they're seen culturally as like wise elders. And so instead of being thrown into a home where they can expire and just kind of left, and hey, you visit them in Christmas and maybe in Easter and that's about it, or on their birthday or something, they're actually constantly involved in their families' lives. And we see that they are actually held to a high standard as the wise ones of the community, and the matriarchy or the patriarchy of the family, the great grandparents, the great grandma, and the great grandpa, they have that, and they have a great deal of knowledge and stories and wisdom that they instill to their kids and their kids' kids and their kids' kids. So that's the biggest thing. And if you talk to those elders, they'll tell you the same thing. They'll tell you that if I was to die tomorrow, who's going to take care of the great grandkids? Who's going to walk them to school? Who's going to make lunch for them? Who's going to teach them this lesson? Who's going to talk to them about that? Who's going to be involved for babysitting on the Wednesday nights? That's the most common thing we see. So it seems to be directly correlated, and maybe even a causal thing, where when you have a sense of purpose, you're much more likely to live longer, and you're much more likely to live a healthier life, because you want to fulfill that purpose to its fullness. So that's the first thing, having a sense of purpose. And so this is something that we don't see here at all. For most people, especially in this day and age with this generation, the millennials, we see that their sense of purpose, they don't have to reach to 100 years old with this strong sense of purpose. Most of them by the age of 20 and 25 and even 30 have an identity crisis, and they don't know what their sense of purpose is or what their calling is. So that's already the first red flag that we're seeing in the United States, and that's why we're plagued with issues that are more psychiatric in nature, mental disorders, emotional disorders, depression, anxiety, all these different things. When you don't have a sense of purpose, when you don't know what your calling is, why you're here, if you're unable to figure out what your passions are and how you can pursue them, then we tend to see that does take a toll on you. And even if you do make it to the ripe old age of, let's say, 60, 70, or 80, you're much more likely to have done a number on your health because of that belief system. You are more stressed out, you're more inflamed, you're producing way more stress hormones than someone who, yep, this is my calling, this is my purpose, and I'm gonna, unapologetically pursue it all the way through. Even if I'm 100, even if I have, bone on bone in my knees, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to take care of this and take care of that and fulfill my duty as whatever role that they play in the community, and in their families. So that's the first thing I would recommend. If you don't know your sense of purpose, if you don't know your calling, what should you do? Well, first thing is you gotta take what society throws. So if you're drowning in an ocean, you got to take whatever society throws at you. It may not be ideal, it may not be what you want, it may not be the gold standard, but you just got to figure out what the next step is to survive. So if they throw you a piece of wood, you got to hang on to that, because that might be the difference between you floating and surviving versus you sinking and drowning. If they throw you an air mattress, if they throw you a plastic ring thing, whatever they throw at you, you gotta take it. And so I would say, first thing, you gotta keep yourself busy. You gotta keep yourself busy. And so get a job, even if you don't like it, even if you hate it, even if it's not what you want to do for the rest of your life. You gotta have a sense of purpose, even if you don't see it yet. And the way to do that is to get some kind of job. You gotta be involved. You gotta have even if your sense of purpose is, I got to make it to work Monday through Friday at this time, and I got to leave at this time, and I got to do my duties while I'm there. That is enough to get the ball rolling in the right direction. And so get a job, even if you don't like it, stick to it, and you will find that if you're doing that diligently, first of all, you're going to have a much better sleep cycle. So you're going to be able to wake up at a set time every day, which is extremely important for us as humans. And in general, we need to have a consistent circadian cycle. We need to wake up at the same time and go to bed at roughly the same time. We see that when we start to change that up, we are much more prone to issues, health issues, mental issues, immune system issues, and so we want to avoid that. So having a job, even if it's something that you would never want to do in a million years, if it's a job, it's going to pay you and it's going to keep you busy Monday through Friday, you're already moving in the right direction. So that's the first thing I would recommend. The second thing is, let's say you already do have a job and you don't like it. Well, what can you do to move in a slightly better environment? So if you're working a 9 to 5 desk job and you say, okay, I've been doing this for 2 years, I still don't feel like I have a sense of purpose. And you're already one step ahead because you have systems and organizations, and hopefully your sleep cycle is pretty consistent, and there is that routineness that you have, which is good. But what I would recommend is you gotta look at maybe another job that is going to be even just a little bit better. And at this point, even if it's at the expense of getting a price cut, so even if you make less money, but it's more fulfilling to you, it might be something worth thinking about. It might be something worth looking into. Ideally, you want to find a job that pays you just as much or better and is more fulfilling for you, that is going to bring you closer to your ideal. Now, this is of course a very loaded topic. This is something that cannot be discussed in 10 or 12 minutes. So I can definitely create more videos on that topic based on the feedback that I get from this and everything like that. But remember, ultimately I do believe that here we have a lot of resources, we have a lot of knowledge, we have organic food and time, and we have information online, everything like that. So there is no real excuse for us to not be part of the blue zone. There is no real excuse for us to not be living up to our hundreds, if that's what we're called to live up to, and to do it in a way that's fulfilling and healthy and with a sense of drive and purpose and vigor in our lives. So we have that quality and quantity. That I think is the most important thing, and I think it all starts with knowledge. I think it starts with our ability to communicate and learn from these other cultures and societies and start to bring that back here as well. And we can do it in a way that doesn't influence the cultural norm of the American culture or anything like that, but rather complement it and take it to another level. Because think about it, if we were living around more fulfilled, more passionate, and we have a great sense of purpose in our lives, that not only affects you and your well-being, but it affects your circle, so your family, your friends, your community. And if there's enough people like that, creating that ring, that ripple effect in their community, we can actually make a massive movement in our society to improve our health and well-being. So unfortunately, the World Health Organization says that in 2020, so you may be watching this and it's already 2020, the number one reason for disability in the United States is going to be depression. And so that's a very scary statistic. And I think it's time that we fight that directly and we have those hard conversations and we see what it is that we need to do to be able to start reversing that process, and so that we aren't having and developing depression, and we aren't creating a culture that is much more prone, and a generation that's much more prone to depression and anxiety and health disorders and diabetes and inflammation and all that stuff. That's the $1,000,000 question, and that's probably one of my biggest advice that I would give to you as a viewer, and to anybody listening to this right now, is you do want to make sure that you have that sense of purpose. And even if it starts off with you doing something that you don't like, it's still better than not doing anything at all, because you will fall into a downward spiral and it will not be good for you or your family or your loved ones or your community or your country or your nation or for humanity as a whole.